rated private.
Good afternoon.
Convinced me to go to in the first place.
On behalf of the whole Gilbert family, it is my honor to welcome you here today to honor Ron's memory.
What's it called? Child sex.
Join in strength as one community. We also hope that our gathering will be safe. We do ask that you keep your masks properly over your mouths and noses the duration of our service, and that you maintain social distancing as much as possible. Let us go. It is hard to sing of oneness when our world is not complete, when the ones who brought us home now are gone. Yet the fullness of their life is part of what we have become, and their spirit in our memory lives on. It is hard to sing no one this when our world is not complete, when we feel as though we walk the path alone. Now if memory can guide us, give us strength to find our way, grant us courage to remember and to grow. We gather today to remember our dear beloved Ronald Gilbert and join our hearts together in honor of his memory, of his life, to give comfort and strength to his family and to each other. Mourning is a time filled with many emotions and memories, bitter and sweet and sometimes both. We begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Ron's life with the millennia-old tradition of our people Israel and with the eternity of God. Our rabbis taught that there are three crowns: the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty. But they emphasized the crown of a good name. It excels them all. The book of Ecclesiastes says a good name is to be treasured above the most precious of oil. Wealth, health, even life passes away, but a good name will last forever. It is this view that the Talmud teaches, that we erect monuments for the righteous, that their deeds are their memorials. They will be remembered and revered for the kindness they have shown, for the love they have given. They are shining examples of what it means to be a mensch, and Ron certainly lived up to these teachings. Adonai ma adam v'tedaehu ben enosh v'techashvehu. God, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath, our days like a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to return to dust, and were we wise, we'd understand where we were going. We would know that when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not come with us. But the wholehearted and the upright, we know they will have peace. Those who trust in God will not be alone. The gifts of spirit our loved ones gave us cannot be measured or weighed, nor can they be lost or tarnished by time. In our darkest hours, their light and their warmth will always be with us. And may we find comfort and courage now, and in the fullness of time, find healing and peace. We'll now recite the words of the 23rd Psalm together. If the words are familiar to you, please feel free to join with me, even if your translation differs slightly from mine. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside the still waters. God restores my soul. God guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You who heal the brokenhearted and bind up their wounds, grant comfort and consolation to these mourners as they face their grief. Fill their lives with the acts of loving kindness and truth, which serve as the genuine memorial to our dear departed. The deep bond of love will remain unbroken. This time I would like to invite forward his sons to share a few words for us. I believe, Mark, you are speaking first.
First of all, I want to thank all of our favorite friends. My father was born in Cleveland, Ohio, played football in high school. He told me that the helmets did not have a face guard at that time. Kind of gives a new meaning to a Jewish place. My father went to Ohio State to study architecture. Along the way, he was introduced to optometry. Rest is history. At Ohio State, my mom met my mother, getting her degree in MRS. Got married. A few months later, they had their favorite son came along. When I was young, my father loved to travel to explore this fine country. Twice a year, we would take trips. We traveled to every state in the United States except Hawaii and Alaska. My father was always very supportive. I was enrolled at Ohio State as a music major. When I went up for orientation, I was told the guitar was not accepted as an instrument. My father met with the director, found out about Berklee College of Music in Boston. Thank you, Dad. My father was president of the Ohio Optometric Association. At the presidential convention, I wrote and played a song for him. A man like you is what I want to be. I'm still trying to live up to that. My father always knew the right thing to say. My first marriage to Beth was falling apart. I called the house, my father answered. I said, Dad, I think my wife and I are getting close. His response, Shirley, pick up the phone, it's for you. My father was loved and admired by all of his patients. There isn't a day that goes by or that someone doesn't ask about my father. Something about how much so losing someone you love really sucks. The memories you share sure make up.
Okay. My papa was a big presence in my life. I will never forget these memories of him. One of my memories is whenever we went to a restaurant, I would always ask for money to get candy from the gumball candy machines, and he would always give us money. To add on, whenever he was at my house, he would always sneak into my cookie jar and get something sweet to eat. When my dad got home from work, I would snitch on him. Another memory that I remember is his funny but not so funny dad. He was a very funny papa. I remember he would also pretend to take my nose, throw it up in the air, and then watch me escape. I always loved when my papa came and watched me play sports. Although he never cheered out loud, he always sat in the crowd looking proud of my accomplishments. Papa, I will miss you, and I love you.
So I can do this. My father was a man of many stories. Some he told, some about him. So now I'm going to tell you some stories about my dad that you may not know. Some have already snuck out. His birth name was Myron Ronald Goldstein. However, no one called him Myron. His father, Elmer, and his twin brother, Eddie, both changed their last names to Gilbert to sound less Jewish because Dad's father was a salesman, and it was not always a good thing to be Jewish in those days. So he went by Ron. He's also known as Papa, Dad, Ronald, and Ronnie. He never smoked a cigarette in his life. He never even got drunk in his entire life. He never even had a single drink of alcohol. On Shabbos dinner, he would say, "Where is the kid's straight juice for his wine cup?" Did you know that as a child, he was expelled from kindergarten? True story. Not because of his behavior, because he's always well behaved. It was because of his long, curly, unruly hair. He was told he can't come back until his Shirley Temple curls were cut off. His mother and my Aunt Blanche went to the school and made that teacher change her mind. Curls were made. This is a big surprise to many. Mark already mentioned that, but I'll say it anyway. Our dad was a jock. In high school, he was a starting guard in the football team on the Glenville High School varsity team for 2 years at Leonard. When my dad was young, all the cousins often ate their meals together at Grandpa Gottlieb's house. The other grandchildren used to tell Ron to eat faster because no one could leave the table until everyone was done. He ignored that until one day his cousin Roy offered him dessert if he would hurry up. That became their daily routine to get him to eat faster. That's probably where his love for sweets began. He always had a huge sweet tooth and probably would love to eat dessert for dinner every night. He would eat an entire cake by himself, but it would take about a day, and he would say, "I just want one little sliver at a time." And he would take his sliver, eat it, an hour or so later, one little sliver, one little sliver. He was the king of crumbs. There was never a plate left with any crumbs on it. He definitely was a founding father of the Clean Plate Club. I guess that's, now I know, I guess that's where I'm going. At a Chinese restaurant, he would order the fried poo-poo platter for his dinner and have that as his meal. You can tell he wasn't the healthiest eater in the world. Every time we had a meal together, he couldn't resist taking a taste off your plate without asking. As doing so, he would look over and say, "What you got there?" And then he'd say, "I just want a little taste, just for curiosity's sake." Whenever he would come to our house, The kids and I would have to hide our cookies and hide our candies because the first place he would go would be the cookie jar. And he would dig in and see what he could eat. He'd always say at dinner how full he was. He could not eat one more bite, but yet when dessert came, he always seemed to find room. Judaism was important to my dad. He was not extremely observant, but he's still very connected. He was involved in the Jewish Federation of Greater Dayton, the Jewish Community Center, on multiple committees such as the Film Fest and the Jewish Community Relations Council. He was a strong supporter of my mom with her involvement in JCC, as well as when she was president of Temple Israel. Later in life, the two of them could be seen at every Jewish event in Dayton for years, whether Temple Israel, Beth Abraham, Beth Jacob, Temple Bethor, Chabad, or even when our kids were at Kellogg Academy, they never missed one. My father and I share a lot of passions, the same passions in our profession. He was always about advocating for those with less means. One example is when he worked with Good Neighbor House to give eye exams to people experiencing homelessness. He was past president of the Lions Club, our local optometric society, the Ohio Optometric Association, and he worked relentlessly for our profession, help advancing laws to increase our scope of practice. For example, optometrists in the 80s were not allowed to dilate pupils, and/or in the 90s were not allowed to prescribe medications to treat eye disease. He worked diligently on both those causes. He was a key optometrist, networking with politicians both locally and throughout the state, nationally and over many years advocating for the profession. When he and my mom moved to Dayton, 1959 is when he started practicing optometry here at 813 Troy Street, Old North Dayton. He worked in that office for over 50 years, retiring in his early 80s. I'm sure he's quite proud to be able to work with his two sons and his grandson, Travis, who became an optometrist. He always expressed compassion and concern for his patients. It was a privilege and honor for me to have worked with him. My dad seemed to have a technology allergy. He hated computers, hated smartphones, and all that junk. When we bought him like a small little Palm Pilot to help take the place of his piece of paper, he conveniently lost it. His filing system was carrying around a small piece of torn paper in his pocket with his pencil, and he would meticulously write down his notes that he needed to know for the day. Back in the day at work, we had to fight him tooth and nail to get a fax machine. He would say, "We don't need that crazy contraption." And when electronic health records came around about 10 years ago, I don't know how many times you've heard him say, electronic health records are mandated. So I'm out of here. And that's when he retired. My father always had a love for travel. As an adult, I got to experience trips with him to Alaska, Australia, New Zealand, and Israel, as well as childhood trips in the back of the 1976 Ford LTD on our way to Florida, complete with stopping halfway in Atlanta, staying at a Days Inn. We never stayed at high-end hotels. His frugality probably came from living through the Great Depression and his father leaving his family when my dad was young. His mother had to go to work and there were limited funds. Expensive toys, cars, clothes did not matter to him. I remember him wearing Sanseville pants. We all remember those pants? They had an elastic waist that would constrict and come in and expand. He had about 5 pairs of these. They probably lasted about 30 years. He never had to buy new pants again. His weight changed, he just go back and forth, and that's what he'd wear every day. They used to comment on how much toys and stuff our kids had by saying, "Boy, when I was a kid, I probably just had 1 or 2 of those toys, that's it." Family was important to him. He was always a family man. Both he and my mom came from very dysfunctional, broken families, and together they wanted to make a better life for their children than what they had. He loved my mother dearly, and they were married for 67 years. My dad's non-emotional, quirky, funny, one of his favorite jokes was, How many sides does a roundhouse have? We have Sarah laughing over there because she heard that joke probably when she was Libby's age right now. He would love that joke. He probably told it 8,000 times, and every time no one else laughed, he always chuckled and did his little laugh. A roundhouse has two sides, the inside and the outside. And then he would giggle and roll his shoulders with his little smile. And his idiosyncratic style blended so nicely with my mom's social, busy, always organizing or controlling some project personally. He loved his grandkids and kids without any. He meticulously kept scrapbooks where he would cut out every article, recognition, advertisement, photo, whether any of them were mentioned in the newspaper, professional magazine, Jewish newspaper, wherever it might be. And I have this folder, so at the shiva, I might pull it out as we go through that. Speaking of his grandkids, something we heard him say over and over again as he watched the kids running around, being energetic and crazy. Boy, don't you wish you had half that energy. In the hospital the day before he died, his last coherent words were spoken. With his granddaughter, Erica. She was holding one of his hands. I was holding the other. She looked at him and said, "Grandpa, I love you." And he actually looked in her eyes and looked at her. You could coherently hear him say, "I love you too." A week before he was hospitalized, last time, I was visiting them in the nursing home. As I'm leaving, I said, "My mother, I love you." And as always, my mother says, "I love you too. Thank you for coming. Go home, be with your family." A hug and a kiss. Then I go over to my dad. Tell my dad, "I'll be back tomorrow. I'll see you. I love you, Dad." And my dad just kind of looks up at me and says, "I know." So Erica gets to say, "I love you." And I get that, I know. But even though it was not always said, I always felt his love. Always. Not only from my dad, but from both my parents. I always felt unconditional love. He was a good man, a wonderful role model. He had a warm, kind soul, compassionate, loving, generous, and always made sure his family was taken care of. As I end, there are two words in Yiddish that I choose to help describe the man my father was. Hamish, which means having qualities associated with a home-like atmosphere, simple, warm, relaxed, cozy, unpretentious. That's the one that sticks in my mind the most, unpretentious, my father. And as we heard earlier, he was a mensch, a person of integrity and a person of honor. Dad, I love you.
Hello, these are not my words. These are the words of Travis Trouvier Gilbert, who is in Israel. He could not come on too much because his fifth child, which would be there's a great grandchild that Shirley and Mom had. This is what Trouvier has to say. Grandpa, a man of care, honor, compassion, and warmth. A family man, I was so privileged to have grown up with you at my side. Not every child gets to see his grandfather as often as I did. At every stage of my life, there you were. We spent holidays together. I have only warm memories. Little repetitive here, but you remember the jokes we used to tell? Your favorite, you would say, how many sides does I still tell these jokes to my children. May I be privileged, then he dedicated his life to optometry, to helping others have good vision, carrying in their footsteps. I know how we can change people's lives through vision care. May I be privileged to care for and help as many people as you. Grandpa, I'm at a loss for words. I love you and I will miss you. God, I know you love Grandpa and every one of us more than we can ever imagine. Please take care of Grandpa.
Our sages taught, greet everyone with a warm, cheerful, and pleasant countenance. I believe this is meant to teach us that through simple acts of kindness, we make the world a bit better. Ron Gilbert was the master of this teaching. He was one of the first people I met here at Temple, and many of us can probably say that. Walking out of the office on one of those first Shabbats, a share Shabbat, there were Ron and Shirley sitting at the table in the main foyer to greet everybody. Ron offering his stereotypical corny dad jokes, and Shirley with the money box. And my children would walk in, and many of the jokes you have heard, he would share with them, and his silly faces and more. And I can picture him sitting there smiling, my children, all of our children, giggling, and probably a few adult groans. But you know we liked it too. I honestly don't think I can say I had or witnessed an interaction with Ron that didn't at some point involve warmth, pleasantness, and his smile. He made you feel like a friend. As we've heard the joke about the roundhouse twice, I'm sitting here thinking, if this were the Talmud, it would have a different punchline the second time. And I'm realizing that it's not a punchline, but the teaching in that is that Ron's house has one side, the inside, because everybody who he met, he brought inside. In this past week, I've heard and learned more about his youth and his life and his days before my tenure here at Temple. Just a short span in his lifetime that I have known him. He was raised by a strong and feisty mother in modest and, as you heard, challenging times at home. He worked hard to put himself through school, to build and expand his professional life, and to create a life as he wanted it to be. Upbringings like his could make a person bitter, but not Ron. He took life in stride. He owned the challenges and obstacles. He learned from them. And in his adult life, prioritized what was most important to him, his family and his friends. If I asked Ron how he was doing, I'd maybe get a 1 or 2 word response, and then an entire update on all of the kids and grandkids. His life was his family. He took the brokenness he saw in this world and that he experienced in this world as fuel to change it through Tikkun Olam. From using his optometry skills abroad and in other underserved communities, lobbying and even speaking before the Supreme Court for changes in medical policy that would expand access to eye health care. The more simple acts here at home and in our local community. He internalized compassion and justice and care for others. He was humble, without going into all of his accolades, many of which you heard or will hear in the coming days and weeks. He didn't brag about them. At life cycle moments for a child, we wish that they should grow in Torah and sacred learning, the chuppah, to meaningful, loving relationships, and to ma'asim tovim, to good, compassionate deeds. Ron, in his own way, learned and taught the Jewish Torah and the Torah of his profession. He cherished and adored his wife Shirley, even through the playful banter, dare I say bickering, it was always somehow with a smile still on his face while doing it. And his own expressions of affection, whether the words, I love you, I know, or in his actions. He passed this on through his children and to his great-grandchildren, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and to all of us that his life touched. He lived a life of good deeds, too many to list now. And he did this all with warmth, pleasantness, and cheerfulness, and his iconic shoulder shrug and smile. As we honor his life, as we take his memory, his love, his teachings, and carry them in our hearts and minds, may we too grow a bit stronger through his Torah, through his learning, through our relationships with him, and through his good deeds, that we may bring these things to the world in his honor and in his memory, with even just a touch of his warmth, his compassion, and his love that he shared with us. We'll take a moment now of private meditation. You might choose to use words of prayer in your own heart or reflect on the ways that our dear Ronald touched your life. Adonai yishmocha mikol ra, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzedkecha, uvoacha le'ata, le'ata. Into your care, O God, we entrust the spirit of Ronald Gilbert. For you keep faith with your children in death as in life. As we continue with the traditional words of El Malay Rachamim, I invite those who are physically able to rise, and those who are not, we know you rise in spirit. El Malay Rachamim, Shochem Havrobim, Amzim L'Chanukot HaChatfim Cheshira, Im Grushim Ufurim Kezohar HaRekina, Mazim et nishmat Yachiel Shalach Yoramo, Al Ruchavim Yastireu Besefer Trachim Mitzvul Achayim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato. V'yanuach b'shalom v'nishkavo, v'nomar Amen. In the source of life, the fountain of all being, open our hearts to compassion and our eyes to wisdom, that we might glimpse in perfect peace and sadness the way of all things. May Ronald Gilbert's memory be for us a blessing, and may we never let the light of his love grow dim in our hearts. May we remember all his worthy and righteous deeds, that his memory forever be bound up in the bond of life. God is our source and our destination, our beginning and our end. May Ron's death awaken us to this truth, that the bond of love we shared and share not be severed in sorrow. May he rest in peace, and together we say, Amen. This will conclude our service here. We will continue at Riverview Cemetery. The family will be greeting guests back at Temple following the interment, and as well as observing Shiva Sunday night at the Federation and Monday night in their homes. Thank you for being here. Will the pallbearers please come forward?
That's the rabbinic wisdom of the last few years. And if we can just be mindful of where the camera is, I imagine people might like to see the front, not your back. We will begin with a presentation of the American flag to honor Ron's service to our country. We included more of the liturgy than we sometimes do inside for the sake of warmth and keeping these precinct figures and toes to a minimum. The brevity here is not indicative of the level of honor we wish to give our beloved. Diviti Adonai, Benedicta, Imini, Imini, Baemo. We remember that we are but strangers upon the earth. Like a shadow, our life flees away. Help us, O God, so to walk in your sight, that when the few years of our earthly pilgrimage are ended, we may be ready to meet our end with a tranquil mind. To you we look for comfort and strength when one of our beloved is taken from us, and a link is broken in the chain of love, which binds us together in family union. Though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we shall fear no evil, for you are with us. Be praised, O eternal our God, in all your dispensations, and sanctified be your name forever and ever. We repeat and reiterate the words of El Malay Rachamim. El Malay Rachamim, Hashofen, Namamromi, Amse Menuha Nehona, Tahatanse Hashefina, Indroshim Motori, Zohar Harakia Matiri, Et Nishma Dirachiel Shahalach Laolani Laolama, Bal Harachami, Yasirehu Besheter Knafav Laolami, Vayitrohor Bitror Hachayim Et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nahalato, V'yaduach b'shalom al yitavo v'nomar Amen. May the source of life, the fountain of all being, open our hearts to compassion, our eyes to wisdom, that we might glimpse in perfect peace and sadness the way of all things. May Ronald Gilbert's memory be for us a blessing. May he rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. As the coffin is lowered, as we return Ronald to the earth from which we were taken, we say, Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Nivora. Adonai has given, Adonai has taken away. Blessed be the name of Adonai. We praise you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who forms us in the divine image, who nourishes and sustains us in your goodness. You cause all of us to die according to your wisdom. You know and number every soul. You implant within us immortal life. Blessed are you, Adonai, the true judge. Baruch atah Adonai, Dayan ha'emet. May the love and eternal connection of our souls give us strength as we turn to recite the words hallowed by time, sanctifying the name of God. We honor the memory of Ronald Gilbert with the words of Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish. Please join me at this time if the words of this prayer are familiar to you. And if they are not, let the words of my mouth be as if coming from yours. Yit Gadol, Yit Kadash, Shemei Rabbah, Ve'alma Dibra Yerushay, Yamlit Malchutei, V'chayechon U'yomechon, U'chayei V'chol Beit Yisrael, Va'agala U'bizman Hariv, Kivru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah V'barach Le'olam U'lamei Ohaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpachar v'yitracham v'yitnaseh v'yitchadar v'yithameh v'yithalal shemei v'kudeshav v'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbehata v'nefemata za'amiran v'yalma v'yimru amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba B'Shaya, V'chayim Aleinu V'Achol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. Osei Shalom B'Mruma, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu V'Achol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. May God grant peace to those who mourn and bring comfort to all the bereaved among us, as Ronald Gilbert comes to his eternal home in peace. In Jewish tradition, to shovel dirt into the grave is a mitzvah, a righteous act, one of the greatest mitzvot we can do, for we do it without any hope of reward, and Ron cannot return the favor. With this act, we take the responsibility of caring for our loved ones to the very end. Our loved ones deserve to be buried by kind hands, knowing hands, sorrowful hands. I'll now invite just the immediate family to participate in this mitzvah. Though a painful act, it is born of love and compassion for those who have meant so much. After we conclude our service, I will invite anybody else who wishes to join in this mitzvah.
The same synagogue, you can make it all happen, right? I see every reason not to. Totally see that when they're both ready to go, right on the same day, it's like someone else. There you go. Like you got market it. Kind of
As we conclude, may the memory of Ronald be a blessing. As we mark his essence, as we mark that his essence will never leave our heart and soul. You say, Hamahom Yinachem Etchem. May God bring you comfort and console you. And this concludes our service.